Most people think you need to confront toxic individuals or explain yourself to change their behavior. Wrong. Engaging with a toxic person, even to defend yourself, often feeds the very dynamic you despise. They thrive on your reactions, good or bad, solidifying your role as their emotional target. But what if you could become invisible to their toxicity without saying a word? This video reveals 5 potent psychological techniques that fundamentally change how toxic people see you, starting with the most counterintuitive. Chapter 1. The Invisible Shield. Toxic individuals aren't looking for resolution, they're looking for a response. Your frustration, anger, or even attempts at reason are precisely the fuel they need to maintain their mental categorization of you as a source of drama or supply. The first powerful technique is called gray rocking. It's about making yourself as uninteresting and non-reactive as a gray rock. When a toxic person tries to engage, your responses become brief, factual, and devoid of emotion. No lengthy explanations, no justifications, no emotional displays. You are present but unavailable. For example, at a previous job, I had a colleague who consistently sought to draw me into workplace drama through gossip and complaints. Initially, I tried to engage with empathy, but it only encouraged more of this behavior. Then I decided to practice gray rocking. When approached with complaints, I began responding with simple, factual answers like, "That sounds frustrating," or "I understand." Over time, my colleagues sought my attention less and less, as I no longer provided the emotional fuel they were looking for. Here's the psychological mechanism. This technique leverages their primary cognitive bias, their desperate need for an emotional reaction. When they receive none, their brain struggles to categorize you. You cease to be a stimulating target because there's no payoff for their manipulation. They literally get bored. The emotional triggers they seek are entirely absent, causing them to disengage and shift their focus to more responsive individuals. Research has shown that consistent gray rocking can lead to reduced interactions within weeks. One office worker reported daily demands from a narcissistic boss dropping by 60% after 2 weeks of neutral, fact-only responses. Imagine the relief of feeling less pressured and being able to focus on your work instead of emotional turmoil. This method offers a powerful way to reclaim your peace of mind. Moreover, gray rocking can be applicable in various situations beyond the workplace, including family gatherings or social settings where toxic individuals might be present. In my personal experience, family members sometimes engage in passive-aggressive comments during reunions. By employing the gray rocking technique, responding to jabs with disinterest, I noticed that they eventually redirected their efforts towards someone else in the room who was more emotionally reactive. But gray rocking is just the first layer because neutrality makes you uninteresting. But it doesn't always stop direct incursions, and we need to create barriers that are just as effective. Chapter 2. Erecting Unbreakable Walls. While emotional neutrality makes you boring, it doesn't create a barrier. That's where unbreakable boundaries come into play. This isn't about politely asking for space. It's about drawing a line in the sand that, once crossed, results in a clear and immediate consequence they cannot ignore. Boundary enforcement is the second critical technique. You're not just withdrawing emotionally, you're defining the terms of engagement. These boundaries must be clear, concise, and most importantly, consistently enforced. Toxic people are masters at testing limits, so any waver in your resolve will be immediately exploited. When I first started asserting my boundaries, it felt uncomfortable. I was worried about backlash or conflict. However, a trip to the beach with friends highlighted the importance of boundaries for me. One friend had a habit of belittling my choices and mocking my preferences, making me feel inadequate. During this trip, I decided to enforce boundaries by saying, "If you keep laughing at my choices, I'll take a break from our group discussions." To my surprise, my friend paused, taken aback. Soon after, I noticed a shift in his behavior. By asserting my boundaries, I learned that his need to belittle stemmed from his own insecurities, but my clear stance forced him to reassess his actions. This showed me just how powerful boundary enforcement can be. This method directly taps into the cognitive bias of loss aversion. When a toxic person understands that crossing a boundary means losing access to something they value, your attention, your time, a specific interaction, they are often compelled to respect it. The boundary itself becomes a tangible force, signaling that you will not tolerate their toxic behavior. As you set boundaries, it's essential to communicate them once, clearly, and without emotion. For instance, if your colleague raises their voice during discussions, you might say, "If you start yelling, this conversation will be over." This approach communicates your limits in a straightforward manner, without inviting further drama. It is critical to follow through every single time you set a boundary. Avoid over-explaining or getting drawn into arguments about your boundaries. That's just more emotional supply. The boundary itself and its consistent enforcement is the message. As they encounter these reinforced limits, the toxic person begins to adjust their perception. They may not like it, but they will respect the new rules of engagement. There's power in unwavering boundaries. During family gatherings, I faced a relative who would routinely push my buttons on sensitive topics by saying things like, "Let's not go there," or "I'm not discussing that." In a calm yet stern way, I noticed a marked reduction in their attempts to bait me. When you hold firm to your boundaries, you start to cultivate an environment that values respect for yourself and for others. Once you've set those boundaries, you create a protective space that allows you to engage on your terms, leading us to the next essential technique. Chapter 3: The Art of Tactical Engagement. You might think empathy is the last thing to offer a toxic person, but there's a specific strategic way to use it as a powerful deflector. This third technique, selective empathy, is not about opening yourself up to vulnerability. It's about surgically administering small, controlled doses of validation that disrupt their script. Selective empathy activates the reciprocity bias without making you a target. When a toxic individual feels even a sliver of their emotion or perspective is acknowledged, for instance, saying, "I see this is frustrating for you," it subtly shifts their internal dynamic. They are less likely to perceive you as an adversary to be conquered, and more as someone who, however minimally, understands their struggle. In one memorable encounter with a toxic coworker, I faced a barrage of complaints about workload issues. Instead of getting drawn into justifying my position or escalating the conflict, I simply acknowledged their feelings by stating, "I understand that this situation is difficult for you." This brief acknowledgement effectively halted their attack and shifted the conversation toward a more constructive tone. By not validating their toxicity, I provided a small space for reflection. The key is selective dosing. You're not validating their narrative or accusations, you're acknowledging an emotion. It's like psychological judo, using their own emotional energy to briefly stabilize the interaction, giving you a chance to pivot or disengage. A workplace scenario can highlight this further. If a colleague is verbally attacking you, saying something like, "It sounds like you're having a tough day," can prevent escalation. This acknowledgement doesn't engage with the content of their toxic outburst. Instead, it merely recognizes their feelings. Research shows this reduces outburst frequency by creating an unexpected response. While it may not solve the underlying toxicity, it changes the immediate dynamic, making them temporarily less aggressive toward you. Mastering selective empathy is like holding a mirror to their behavior, allowing you to control the emotional temperature of interactions. You remain calm while subtly influencing their perception of you as an unreactive yet observant presence. This interaction style fosters greater respect and alters how they engage with you moving forward. This approach is even more powerful when combined with previously discussed techniques. As boundaries are tested, the strategic use of selective empathy can disarm unnecessary tension, further reinforcing your newfound position of strength. Now that you've cultivated an environment of emotional neutrality and respect, the next step is to create the illusion of control. Chapter 4. The Illusion of Choice. Toxic individuals crave control, and fighting them directly often amplifies their need to dominate. The fourth technique, choice framing, strategically provides them with an illusion of control by offering limited options that still serve your best interest. This isn't manipulation, it's smart social navigation to protect your peace. Instead of saying no or imposing a single directive, you offer 2 or more pre-approved options. For example, rather than saying, "You can't do that," you might say, "Would you prefer to handle this by 2 p.m. today, or collaborate with John on it by tomorrow?" Both options are acceptable to you, but the toxic person feels they've made the choice. Once, during a conflict with a demanding colleague who insisted on scheduling unnecessary meetings, I shifted the narrative. I framed our meeting as, "I can meet for 5 minutes now, or we can schedule a more in-depth discussion for next Tuesday afternoon." This gave my colleague a sense of control while allowing me to dictate the parameters of the engagement. The result? The frequency of disruptive demands plummeted as they felt they had agency. This technique subtly recategorizes you in their mind. You're no longer an obstacle to overcome, but rather a facilitator or partner in their decision-making process, even if the decisions are pre-vetted by you. This reduces their need to fight you for control, as they perceive they already have it. Case studies, particularly in workplace settings, show immediate results. When faced with toxic behavior, framing interactions in terms of choices fosters cooperation and reduces resistance. When a coworker insists on their agenda, framing the response with choices shifts the power dynamic because they feel involved without realizing they're still operating within the limits you've set. In social settings, I've had success using choice framing with family members who can be critical. Instead of stating, "I don't want to discuss this topic with you," I might say, "Would you prefer to catch up on my recent trip or discuss the upcoming holidays?" This strategy transforms the interaction while keeping the conversation aligned with my preferences, leading to less friction. By consistently using choice framing, you establish yourself as someone who facilitates outcomes rather than obstructing them. This makes you a less desirable target for direct confrontation and allows for smoother interactions. Finally, let's explore the last technique that will drain a toxic person's energy completely, leading you to a transformation in how they perceive you. Chapter 5. The Unshakable Focus. Toxic people often perpetuate problems because the drama feeds them. The fifth and final technique is to adopt an unshakable solution orientation. This means relentlessly pivoting any conversation or interaction back to tangible next steps, effectively starving their desire for conflict and negativity. When a toxic person attempts to engage you in endless blame, gossip, or problem-dwelling, your consistent response is to ask, "What's the solution here?" Or, "What's the actionable next step?" This immediately frustrates their narrative. For example, during family discussions that tend to spiral into negativity, I started taking control by redirecting complaints toward constructive discussions. If someone lamented about a work issue without proposing any solutions, I would simply say, "What do you think would help in that situation?" This technique not only reduced the duration of those discussions, but also shifted the family dynamics toward a more positive atmosphere. Your solution-focused approach forces them to categorize you not as someone who will commiserate or participate in their negativity, but as someone who consistently moves toward resolution. This makes you an unsuitable partner for their toxic behaviors. They learn that engaging with you on problems is pointless, leading them to redirect their energy elsewhere. Research on chronic complainers shows solution focus shifts dynamics positively in 65% of interactions. One person reported venting sessions with a family member dropping from 45 minutes to under 15 minutes by consistently redirecting the conversation to solutions. The more firmly I presented a solution focus, the faster these interactions transformed from complaints to actionable discussions. Combining solution orientation with gray rocking, boundary enforcement, selective empathy, and choice framing creates a powerful defense against toxicity. You become someone who provides no emotional supply, enforces clear limits, strategically disarms with minimal validation, and refuses to dwell on problems. This holistic approach fundamentally transforms how toxic people see you, from an accessible target to a neutral, unyielding, and ultimately unappealing presence. This shift reclaims your peace and control. Each interaction that once left you drained or anxious can now become an opportunity to practice these techniques and sustain your emotional well-being. If you want to master advanced strategies for protecting your energy and navigating complex social dynamics with confidence, subscribe to Mind Over Matter. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Embracing these strategies will help you cultivate healthier relationships, reclaim control over your interactions, and ultimately foster a positive environment around you.